The story of the 1972 Washington quarter begins not only with the coin itself, but with the long tradition of the Washington Quarter series, which was first struck in 1932 to commemorate the bicentennial of George Washington's birth. The Treasury Department had sought to honor the first president of the United States with a coin that would reflect dignity, respect, and permanence, and after reviewing several designs, the portrait of Washington by sculptor John Flanagan was chosen based on the classical bust created in 1785 by French artist Jean-Antoine Houdon. This portrait became the enduring image that would remain on the quarter for decades, and by the time 1972 arrived, the Washington quarter had already been circulating for 40 years, solidifying its place as a staple of American coinage. The year 1972 itself was a time of transition and change in the United States socially, politically, and economically. The Vietnam War was still a defining issue. Richard Nixon was president, and the country was experiencing shifts in culture and society against this backdrop. The Washington quarter continued its role as both a common everyday coin and as a collectible for numismatists. It was minted in large numbers, yet the details of the 1972 issue tell a unique story of design, production, and value. The obverse of the 1972 Washington quarter carried the familiar profile of George Washington facing left, with the word liberty at the top, the phrase, "In God we trust," positioned just to the left of the portrait, and the date 1972 clearly inscribed at the bottom. This design had become so iconic by this point that it symbolized American stability and tradition. The reverse design created by John Flanagan as well featured a majestic bald eagle with outstretched wings clutching a bundle of arrows in its talons, and flanked by olive branches above the eagle. The words "United States of America" were boldly inscribed with the denomination $quarter at the bottom, and the motto, E pluribus unum. Just above the eagle's head, this powerful image combined strength with peace, reflecting the dual character of the nation. From a technical standpoint, the 1972 Washington quarter was struck at 3 different mints: the Philadelphia Mint, which produced coins without a mint mark, the Denver Mint, which used the D mint mark, and the San Francisco Mint, which produced proof coins bearing the S mint mark. The Philadelphia and Denver coins were intended for general circulation, while the San Francisco proof issues were specially struck for collectors. The proof coins stood out because of their mirrored fields and frosted devices, which displayed the artistry of the original design in its sharpest form. One of the most significant aspects of the 1972 Washington quarter is its composition. By this time, silver had already been removed from the quarter 5 years earlier in 1965 due to rising silver prices and public hoarding. Prior to that, quarters were 90% silver and 10% copper, but beginning in 1965, the mint introduced a clad composition consisting of an outer layer of copper nickel bonded to a pure copper core. The 1972 quarter followed this same standard with a total composition of 67% copper and 8.33% nickel. This change allowed the mint to continue producing large quantities of quarters without the risk of losing money to rising bullion values. The clad composition also gave the quarter its modern look and feel, with a silvery color that was harder and more resistant to wear than the older silver issues. The mintage numbers for the 1972 Washington quarter were significant, with hundreds of millions struck in Philadelphia and Denver combined. This ensured that the coin was readily available across the nation for everyday transactions. However, as with many coins, the large mintage did not prevent variations and errors from entering circulation. Some 1972 quarters displayed striking anomalies such as doubled dies, weak strikes off center strikes, and other minting mistakes, which became prized by collectors because of their rarity and uniqueness. Even today, certain varieties from 1972 remain highly collectible, with values depending on their Condition rarity and visibility of the error, condition and grading, play an essential role in the story of the 1972 Washington quarter coins that circulated heavily in commerce, naturally show signs of wear with flattened hair details on Washington's portrait and worn feathers on the eagle, but uncirculated examples preserved straight from mint sets or rolls reveal the sharpness of the original design. And these high-grade coins, especially those graded Mint State 65 and above by professional grading services, carry strong collector premiums. Proof coins from San Francisco in deep cameo contrast are also valued highly for their aesthetic beauty and scarcity. In terms of numismatic context, the 1972 Washington quarter sits at an interesting place in history. The coin bridges the gap between the earlier silver issues and the modern clad era. It reflects the changing economic realities of the late 1960s and early 1970s, when the United States had to adapt its coinage to deal with inflation, rising commodity prices, and the demands of mass circulation. Yet despite these changes, the Washington quarter remained visually consistent, carrying the same portrait and reverse design that Americans had known for decades. This continuity gave the coin a sense of familiarity, even as the nation itself underwent dramatic transformations. Beyond its technical and artistic aspects, the 1972 quarter also represents an important chapter in the cultural life of the United States coins serve. As miniature historical documents reflecting the values and identity of a nation at a given time, the Washington quarter in 1972 spoke to the enduring respect for the founding father, the reliance on national symbols like the eagle, and the balancing of economic necessity with artistic tradition. It was both an object of daily use passed from hand to hand in stores and markets, and a piece of history waiting to be examined closely by collectors when examining the legacy of the 1972 Washington quarter. It is essential to consider the broader Washington quarter series itself, from its origin in 1932 through the clad transition of 1965 and into the later state quarters program launched in 1999. The Washington quarter has been one of the most versatile and widely collected coins in American history. The 1972 issue is a vital part of that legacy, representing the stability of the design while also embodying the modern materials and minting practices that would define the series for decades to come. Even today, 50 years later, the 1972 Washington quarter remains a point of fascination for collectors, historians, and coin enthusiasts. Some search for high-grade mint state examples, others hunt for rare error coins, and still others simply enjoy holding a piece of circulating history that connects directly back to the traditions of the United States Mint. For a collector building a date and mint mark set of Washington quarters, the 1972 issues are indispensable, and for those interested in modern American coinage, they offer a fascinating study of design continuity, economic adaptation, and cultural symbolism. Thus, the 1972 Washington quarter is not merely a piece of change, it is a snapshot of American history in metal, a continuation of a tradition that began with George Washington's bicentennial and one that would carry forward into the 21st century. Its design, its composition, its errors and varieties, and its cultural meaning all combine to make it a subject worthy of detailed study and appreciation for both novice collectors and advanced numismatists alike. Imagine holding in your hand a simple 25-cent piece minted in 1988, a coin that might appear to be ordinary to the casual observer. Yet when you look closer and understand its background, you begin to see that the 1988 Washington quarter represents not only a piece of American currency, but also a chapter in the larger narrative of United States history, coinage artistry, and economic policy. The Washington quarter series itself dates back to 1932, when the United States prepared to celebrate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. The Treasury Department and the United States Mint decided that the quarter-dollar denomination would serve as the medium for honoring the first president of the United States. A competition was held and the winning design came from sculptor John Flanagan, who based his portrait of Washington on the famous bust created in 1785 by the French neoclassical sculptor Jean-Antoine Houdon from 1932 until 1964, Washington. Quarters were composed of 90% silver and 10% copper, but with the rising value of silver in the early 1960s, Congress moved to a clad composition beginning in 1965. From that year onward, the quarter was produced with an outer layer of copper-nickel alloy bonded to a pure copper core, giving the coin its familiar silvery color while eliminating its precious metal content. By 1988, the Washington quarter had been in circulation for more than half a century, and the design, though simple and elegant, had become an enduring icon of American coinage. On the obverse of the 1988 Washington quarter, you find the familiar bust of George Washington facing, left the word Liberty arched above his head. The national motto, "In God We trust," to the left of his portrait, and the date 1988 placed below Washington's neck. The mint mark, if present, appears to the right of the ribbon that binds his hair in a queue. During this year, quarters were struck at both the Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint, as indicated by the presence of a P or D mint mark, while coins produced in Philadelphia prior to 1980 did not bear a mint mark. By 1988, the P mark had become standard practice-proof. Versions of the 1988 quarter were also struck at the San Francisco Mint, and these proofs display an S mint mark. The reverse of the 1988 Washington quarter maintained Flanagan's original eagle design, an American bald eagle with outstretched wings perched upon a bundle of arrows with two olive branches beneath. The design symbolized both readiness for defense and the pursuit of peace. The legend United States of America was inscribed around the top. The denomination quarter dollar placed at the bottom, and the phrase e pluribus unum, meaning out of many one, located just above the eagle's head. From a production standpoint, the 1988 Washington quarter was struck in the hundreds of millions, making it a common circulation coin as part of the broader series. However, the numismatic interest. In 1988, quarters often comes from mint state examples, coins that survived without wear or circulation, as well as error varieties or proof issues. Collectors often seek examples graded at the highest levels by third-party grading services, such as the Professional Coin Grading Service (PCGS) or the Numismatic Guarantee Company (NGC). In such pristine conditions, values can increase significantly compared to face value, even though the majority of 1988 quarters remain common. The historical context of the late 1980s adds depth to the story of the 1988 Washington quarter. In 1988, Ronald Reagan was completing his second term as President of the United States. The country was experiencing significant political and economic shifts with the Cold War nearing its end, the stock market still recovering from the crash of October 1987, and technology beginning to reshape American life. In many ways, the circulation of quarters, such as the 1988 issue, represents the daily economic activity of an era when people used cash more frequently than they do today. Each coin changed hands countless times at gas stations, diners, movie theaters, and grocery stores before debit cards and digital payments became the norm. This places the 1988 quarter not only as a piece of metal but as a witness to a changing America. In the numismatic world, the 1988 Washington quarter also serves as a bridge between two eras. By the late 1980s, discussions were already beginning within the United States Mint about refreshing the nation's circulating coinage programs. By the end of the following decade, the state quarters program would launch in 1999, transforming the familiar reverse design into a series of rotating commemoratives that celebrated all 50 states. In hindsight, the 1988 quarter stands among the last decade of traditional eagle reverse issues that had defined the quarter for generations. Another important aspect for collectors is the role of errors and varieties in 1988 quarter production. The minting process at such a large scale often produced mistakes that today are highly sought after among specialists. Examples include double-die obverses or reverses off center strikes, broad strikes, and coins struck on the wrong planche. Such coins, though rare, can command substantial premiums depending on the severity of the error and the condition of the coin when preserved. The proof quarters minted in San Francisco during 1988 are especially notable. These were intended for collectors and were struck with polished dies on specially prepared planches to achieve sharp details and mirror-like surfaces. In many cases, the contrast between the frosted devices and the reflective fields creates what numismatists call a cameo or deep. Cameo finish modern grading services evaluate these attributes carefully, and high-grade deep cameo proofs from 1988 are prized additions to Washington Quarter collections. It is also worth mentioning how the Washington Quarter design of 1988 reflects the artistic conventions of its time. Flanagan's original design had been criticized over the decades by some numismatists and art critics who felt that the portrait of Washington lacked strength or classical elegance. Others, however, appreciated its simplicity and directness. By the 1980s, after more than 50 years of use, the design had become so familiar that Americans associated the quarter almost instinctively with Washington's face, creating a cultural bond that made the coin part of everyday national identity. For those who study the economics of coinage, the 1988 quarter also reveals the impact of changing material values. The clad composition that began in 1965 had proven effective in stabilizing production costs. The intrinsic metal value of the 1988 quarter remained well below its face value, ensuring that coins would not be hoarded or melted for profit. As silver quarters had been 2 decades earlier, this cost efficiency allowed the mint to continue striking massive quantities of quarters for circulation, meeting the demands of commerce in an expanding economy. As we move deeper into the significance of the 1988 quarter, it becomes clear that while the coin itself may not be rare or precious in most cases, it carries layers of historical, economic, and cultural meaning that make it a fascinating subject for collectors, historians, and everyday Americans alike. The quarter embodies the legacy of George Washington, the artistry of John Flanagan, the practical realities of modern coinage, and the lived experience of countless individuals who used it in their daily lives. When you hold a 1988 Washington quarter, you are not just holding 25 cents, you are holding a piece of the late 20th century, a witness to both the continuity of American traditions and the subtle transformations that were reshaping the nation in the years leading up to the dramatic changes of the 1990s. Imagine holding in your hand a piece of American history that not only represents 5 cents in value, but also carries the weight of a nation's struggles, triumphs, and transformations. The Jefferson nickel of 1940 is far more than a small coin. Struck in nickel and copper, it is a symbol of an era, a reflection of the United States as it stood on the brink of global conflict, and a continuation of a design that had already begun to carve its place in numismatic history. The story of the 1940 Jefferson nickel begins with its origins just a year after the first issue in 1938, when the United States Mint replaced the long-running Buffalo nickel with a new design honoring the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. The Buffalo nickel had been admired for its artistry, yet it posed challenges in terms of production and durability. Its intricate details often wore down quickly, and the Mint sought a design that would not only be more practical, but also more enduring. The winning design for the Jefferson nickel came from Felix Schlag, a German-born American sculptor whose entry triumphed in the 1938 design competition. Schlag's obverse portrait of Jefferson was a bold, left-facing bust, drawing attention to the intellectual strength of the statesman, while the reverse featured a depiction of Monticello Jefferson's beloved Virginia home, though Schlag's original design underwent modifications imposed by the Commission of Fine Arts and the Mint. The final result was a coin that blended functionality with dignity. The Jefferson nickel would remain in production with various modifications for decades to come, and in 1940 it was still in its infancy as a series. Now let us focus on the historical backdrop of 1940. America was still recovering from the Great Depression. Franklin D. Roosevelt was leading the nation with his New Deal policies, while at the same time preparing for the possibility of war in Europe, although the United States would not enter World War II until December 1941. The events unfolding overseas were already influencing the American economy industry, and public sentiment coins struck in 1940, including the Jefferson nickel, reflected a sense of stability, continuity, and readiness for whatever challenges lay ahead. From a technical standpoint, the 1940 Jefferson nickel was struck in a composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. The standard alloy used since the coin's introduction, the weight was 5 grams with a diameter of 2 millimeters, and a plain edge production took place at 3 mint facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each producing millions of nickels. Yet with subtle variations that intrigue collectors to this day, the Philadelphia mint coins carried no mint mark. The Denver issues bore a small D mint mark on the reverse to the right of Monticello, and the San Francisco coins carried an S mint mark in the same position. Mintage figures for 1940 are significant. Philadelphia produced over 176 million nickels. Denver struck around 43 million, and San Francisco added nearly 40 million together. These numbers ensured that the coin circulated widely across the country, becoming a familiar presence in pockets, purses, and cash registers. However, within these large mintages, there exist varieties and conditions that make certain examples far more valuable and desirable than others to collectors. The strike quality varied depending on the mint, with some coins showing sharper details, particularly in Monticello's steps, while others suffered from weaker impressions, making the full step designations a key factor in grading. And value collectors of Jefferson nickels often focus on the so-called full steps designation, which refers to the clarity of the steps at the base of Monticello on the reverse. A coin that shows 5 or 6 complete steps without breaks or weakness is considered a full steps example. Such coins are scarce for many years of the series, and the 1940 issue is no exception. While millions of nickels were struck, only a fraction display fully defined steps, and those that do are highly sought after by specialists. High-grade, full steps examples can command impressive premiums at auction, especially when certified by reputable grading services. Beyond the technical details, the 1940 Jefferson nickel holds significance as a coin struck at a crossroads in American history. Collectors often view it as part of the pre-war era, when the design was still new and the nation was still at peace. Within just a few years, the composition of the nickel would change dramatically during World War II, when silver was used in place of nickel to conserve the strategic metal for wartime production. The so-called war nickels issued from 1942 to 1945 stand apart, but the 1940 issue remains a reminder of the last years before that dramatic shift in materials. Errors and varieties of the 1940 Jefferson nickel add another layer of fascination. Among them are double dies, repunched mint marks, and striking anomalies. Some examples show noticeable doubling in the inscriptions or details of Monticello. Others display mint marks that were punched more than once, creating overlapping impressions. These varieties may not be common, but they capture the attention of specialists who scour their collections and rolls of nickels, hoping to uncover a hidden rarity. The condition of a 1940 Jefferson nickel plays a crucial role in determining its value circulated. Examples are abundant and usually hold little more than face value unless they exhibit unique characteristics. However, uncirculated coins, especially those with brilliant luster, sharp strikes, and full steps designation, can bring hundreds or even thousands of dollars depending on rarity and certification. The grading scale developed by the American Numismatic Association provides a framework for assessing these coins, from circulated grades, like good and fine, to mint state levels, ranging From MS-60 to MS-67 and beyond, examples at the highest levels of preservation are exceptionally rare and form the pinnacle of many collections. Over the decades, the Jefferson nickel series has sometimes been overlooked compared to other American coins such as the Lincoln cent or the Morgan silver dollar. Yet it has gained increasing respect among numismatists for its longevity. Diversity and historical context, the 1940 issue in particular, has a special place because of its timing in history, its role in the development of the series, and its connection to Jefferson's legacy. As we reflect on this coin, we see more than metal. We see craftsmanship, design, symbolism, and history intertwined. The Jefferson nickel of 1940 speaks to the values of America, the admiration of its leaders, the continuity of its coinage, and the enduring connection between people and the money they use. Each example, whether worn from decades of circulation or preserved in mint state condition, carries with it stories of commerce, survival, and national identity. It is a coin that invites us to look closer, to appreciate the artistry of Felix Schlag, to consider the political climate of the time, and to understand the importance of seemingly ordinary objects in telling the extraordinary story of a nation. So when you hold a 1940 Jefferson nickel in your hand, remember you are not just holding 5 cents, you are holding the legacy of Thomas Jefferson, the creativity of Felix Schlag, the industrial might of the United States Mint, and the resilience of a nation on the verge of historic change. This small coin is a portal into the past, and a reminder of how even the simplest things can carry profound meaning. Imagine holding in your hand a coin that carries the weight of American history, a coin that has witnessed the passing of generations, a coin that marked the very beginning years of one of the most iconic designs in United States coinage. We are talking about the 1939 Jefferson nickel, a piece of money that is far more than just 5 cents. It is a gateway into the past, a reflection of art, politics, and the economy of its time, and a story that blends numismatic beauty with the struggles of a changing nation. To understand the importance of the 1939 Jefferson nickel, we must go back to its origins and examine why this coin came into being at all. For decades before its arrival, the 5-cent denomination was dominated by the buffalo nickel, designed by James Earl Fraser. The buffalo nickel, first released in 1913, was beloved for its rugged portrayal of a Native American on the obverse and the American bison on the reverse. Yet as years went on, mint officials began to complain about the practicality of the design. The buffalo nickel was notoriously difficult to strike properly. The details often wore down quickly, and the design presented challenges for long-term coinage use. By the mid-1930s, the United States Mint had already been preparing to replace it, and that is when the call for a new design emerged. The Treasury announced a competition inviting artists to submit their concepts for the new 5-cent coin. The challenge was to honor one of the nation's great leaders. And so the focus turned to Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, 3rd President of the United States and founder of the University of Virginia. His home Monticello would also become part of the design. The winner of the competition was Felix Schlag, a German-born sculptor who immigrated to the United States. His vision was chosen over hundreds of submissions, and the Jefferson nickel was born in 1938. But the year 1939 was the first full year of wide production, and thus holds a very special place in history. This year was also critical because it marked the first significant adjustments to the design, and these small but important differences would go on to intrigue collectors for generations. The 1939 Jefferson nickel comes in 2 primary reverse varieties, one with a reverse of 1938 style and the other with an improved reverse of 1940 style. The difference lies in the lettering and detail on Monticello. In the first version, the letters in Monticello and 5 cents are weak and curved, while in the later variety they were sharpened and strengthened. This seemingly small detail has created one of the most fascinating collectible points for this coin, and it is why 1939 nickels are so heavily Studied within numismatics as we move deeper into the historical context, the world of 1939 was a turbulent one. America was emerging from the Great Depression. Europe was plunging into the beginning stages of World War II, and the role of coinage became more than just commerce. It became a symbol of stability. The Jefferson nickel was a fresh design meant to bring pride to the American people. Its smooth, clean portrait of Jefferson facing left with Monticello on the back gave the coin a sense of dignity. It was modern yet classical, and it represented ideals of leadership and home. Jefferson was not just any president. He was a philosopher, a scientist, and a farmer. His image on a coin meant that Americans were reminded daily of values tied to liberty, knowledge, and perseverance. The mintage of 1939 nickels was also notable. They were struck at 3 mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, each carrying unique mintages and unique stories. The Philadelphia Mint produced the largest numbers, while the San Francisco issues were fewer in quantity, and today they are scarcer in higher grades. Collectors often prize the 1939D and 1939S nickels as tougher finds, especially in uncirculated condition, while Philadelphia issues provide an excellent entry point for collectors studying varieties. One of the most important varieties is the 1939 doubled Monticello and doubled 5-cents variety, a doubled die reverse that shows strong doubling on the inscriptions. This error coin is one of the most famous varieties in the entire Jefferson series and continues to command high prices at auction. The doubled die error happened when the working die received more than one misaligned impression from the hub, creating a dramatic doubling effect. Such varieties have fascinated collectors for decades because they reveal the very process of how coins are made. Mistakes become treasures, and in this case, the 1939 doubled die reverse is one of the crown jewels of the Jefferson nickel series. As we analyze the artistry, we must also consider Felix Schlag's role. His original submission actually included a more classical and stylized Monticello with a side view, but Mint officials requested changes to make it more realistic. He also proposed a palm tree design in the background, but this was rejected. The final design we see today was a compromise between his artistic vision and the government's requirements. Schlag himself would not receive great fame during his lifetime, but his work continues to live in every Jefferson nickel struck since 1938. In terms of condition rarity, the 1939 nickel presents challenges for collectors. While millions were made, few survived in pristine condition due to weak strikes. And circulation, many nickels from this year show soft details, especially on Jefferson's hair and Monticello's steps. Collectors often pursue full steps examples, a designation meaning that all the steps on Monticello are sharply defined such. Coins are incredibly scarce for 1939, and they are highly prized by advanced numismatists. The pursuit of full steps nickels has become a hobby within itself because it requires immense patience and knowledge in searching for well-struck examples. While most coins circulated heavily during the time and wore down quickly, the few that remain untouched in mint state condition shine as historical relics, representing the ideal of perfection in minting beyond the numismatic technicalities. The 1939 Jefferson nickel also embodies American culture of the late 1930s. It was a time when radio-dominated households, swing music filled dance halls, and cars like the Ford Deluxe roamed the streets. Yet beneath this energy loomed the threat of global war. The Jefferson nickel circulated in a world of uncertainty, serving as a small but constant reminder of American heritage and leadership. Thomas Jefferson's face symbolized not only money, but also ideals that the United States was striving to uphold. As the 1939 nickel spread through commerce, it touched the lives of millions buying food, paying for transportation exchanged in shops and banks. It was handled by farmers, factory workers, children saving coins in jars, and soldiers. Soon, to be called into service during the coming war, the Jefferson nickel became a part of daily life. Its durability and wide circulation ensured that nearly every American would encounter it, thus making it a truly national coin. The legacy of the 1939 Jefferson nickel is vast. It is a coin of firsts, a coin of varieties, a coin of artistry, and a coin of history. It bridges the end of the Buffalo nickel era and the rise of a modern American design. It carries the story of Felix Schlag, his triumph, and compromise. It reflects the nation's journey from depression to wartime economy. It is a small metal disc, yet a powerful symbol of endurance and identity. Collectors today continue to study it, cherish it, and build collections around its varieties. And Mintage's auction houses feature it regularly, and error specialists never tire of analyzing its doubled dies and full-step strikes. The Jefferson nickel series would continue largely unchanged for decades, making the 1939 issue stand out even more as a key moment in its evolution as you look at the coin. Remember, it is not merely 5 cents. It is a window into the past, a conversation between history and art, and a bridge between generations. That is the story of the 1939 Jefferson nickel, a coin that deserves respect, fascination, and a permanent place in the chronicles of American numismatics.